Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cloud Zendo for our weekly public Dharma talk. And tonight we have the great good fortune to have Venerable Pannavati with us. Venerable Pannavati, are you able to? There we go. Here, I'm going to add you to the. Sorry, we're just getting her online here. There we go. So I'm going to add you to your spotlight, so we're both spotlighted here. Wait, did I remove my spotlight? There we go. So, can you hear me okay, Venerable Pannavati?
I can hear you perfectly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming.
Would you go and get my cords just plugged in so I can plug it in? Just bring the whole white cord. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to make sure we have power, right?
Yeah.
I just noticed myself, like I'm only on 18%. Where's my cable? So, good to see you again. I actually came through North Carolina several years ago and got to come to your refuge there and visited because my mom lives nearby. So good to see you again. A few words about Venerable Pannavati for those who don't know. She's a former Christian pastor, is co-founder and co-abbot of the Embracing Simplicity Hermitage and Meditation Center, co-director of Heartwood Refuge, and president of the Treasure Human Life Foundation. And I believe you're there at the Heartwood Refuge now.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Venerable Pannavati, for joining us, and we'll give you the cloud floor.
All right. Thank you so much. I guess you all don't know that I'm really your sister. I'm a Zenny too. I'm a little bit of everything. And I think that's all right. Seeming as the Buddha didn't have any of it. He only had Buddhayana, right? So Kay, this is not going to take me where I need to go. I have also an extension cord that because I need to plug it up in here in about 15 minutes. Thanks. And it's really funny because no matter where I go, when I try to change my dress, they say, "Oh no, just keep the dress you have." So I dress as a Theravada, and it's very interesting to me. Either nobody wants me, or or they must feel that I'm just all right. You can go so far. And at some point, there's like no need to change because you start to see the congruent nature of the Dharma. So it may be expressed in a certain way for certain minds and certain people with certain propensities. On one hand, and on the other hand, that same message can only get across if it's delivered in a different way, packaged in a different context and delivered with different shading. And so the great skill that comes with realization is being able to know how to talk to anybody, anywhere, about the Dharma that has one taste. And so I'm going to talk to you from all over the map tonight, from many different traditions, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying, and I hope that it adds some seasoning to the practice that you already have, and what you do, the way you look at things, and the way you think about things, and the way you understand things. We can get such in the habit of just speaking, Buddhist jargon, and especially our lineage jargon, and thinking that that is the practice of Buddha Dharma. But the practice of Buddha Dharma, not the words that we use. It's not our empty theories, but it's actually what we do in life, how we live and move and have our being. So to borrow from a statement on Zen from Roshi Pat, she said, real Zen is the practice of coming back to the actual right now in the moment self, coming back to the naturalness, the intimacy and simplicity of our true nature. Zen practice is not about getting away from life as it is, but it's about getting into life as it is, with all of its vividness, its beauty, its hardships, its joy, and its sorrows, awakening to who we are and awakening the aspiration to serve others. And that's what I wanted to really focus on tonight, the aspiration to serve others, that which gives us a joy in the practice. The Buddha said, if you knew, as I know, the benefit of generosity, you would not let an opportunity go by without sharing with others. So he taught and he lived what is really like a way of life, a way of giving and receiving of the practice of Dharma. And he said that that was the first thing that he taught a disciple. He said before he would be able to even take in this wisdom and develop it into not an earthly wisdom, but prajna, the pure wisdom that we would need to have a heart, cultivate a heart of generosity. So when we talk about cultivation, what is cultivation? What does it mean to cultivate a heart of generosity? There is a thought, there is a contemplation, and there is an action. For instance, when one is sitting, this is a preliminary way that we have to move in our life so that when we sit down, we could set aside all covetousness and grief for the world. But if we haven't done the things that allow us to sit there in that equanimity, in that space of no thingness, then we're going to have that monkey mind. We're going to be thinking about what we did. We're going to be thinking about what we didn't do. We're going to be thinking about what's happening and what we can control and what we can't control. The mind is going to be stuck in that grasping or in that aversion to the vicissitudes of life, the praise, the blame, the loss, the gain, the pleasure, the pain, the shame, and the fame. And all of these things keep us tied to and identified with who we call ourselves. But when we're sitting there in meditation, if we have set aside grief and covetousness for the world, then that pure prajna born of samadhi can penetrate the ordinary mind, and we start to get a glimpse of our essential nature. And so that's what this is all about, but that's just one half of it. In the Majjhima Nikaya, which is a Theravadan text, Sutta number 8, it's called effacement, the rubbing out of self. And he says, you sit here on the pillow and you think that that's effacement. He said, but that's not effacement. That's a pleasant abiding here and now. He said, this is what I call effacement. When you're enduring hardships and insults, when you're able to be patient in the time of great anxiety, when you're able to have, and he gave a list of, I think it was like 40 different things that said, others do this, but we will not do that here. So he was speaking of how we should carry ourselves so it moves from being just an intellectual observation into an actual action. It speaks of our actual conduct, what we must do. So cultivation is really about developing like the conduct of an awakened one. And in order to develop the conduct, we can't just think about it. Yes, we do think about it, but we can't just think about it. So there's something else that's required. We have to be like all in and putting ourselves into the present moment, the situation, and finding that highest point of character that we can find within ourselves, and knowing when we meet it and knowing when we miss the mark. And it gets to be pretty much okay to notice when you miss the mark. Otherwise, through our human arrogance, we think we're all that. We think we're all together, or at least we think we fool the other person. But there is a place that one comes where one finds joy in quickly recognizing their shortcomings, the part that keeps them focused on self or engrossed in what this misidentified self seems to need or seems to want or has to have. And as we do that, we start to realize how attached we are to the self that we have constructed through the six sense basis. What we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and think through our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and mind. But what level of consciousness is that actually? There is something about when we sit with a mind that is at ease, having abandoned grief and covetousness for the world, that we drop into a space that's not far and it's not near. We take up a kind of identity that's not me and not other than me. And so we come into sort of a middle ground that if one pursues that space, then one can ultimately just be approached by, that means the scales fall from our eyes and Prajna is made manifest. So there's not anything we can actually do to get it, but we can be at the right intersection for the clear seeing and for its dawning upon us. If I'm trying to go uptown and the bus uptown is at 7th and T, and I'm standing on 4th and D, I'm not going to get uptown. So it's about positioning oneself to be in at the right intersection for something to occur. So we actually move into a space of not doing, and yet something gets done. Now, how we set ourselves up to be able to receive this is most easily, I'll say, most easily done in how we handle ourselves in the course of the day when things come up. Just thinking about that, the Buddha is saying, if you knew as I know the benefit of generosity, you would not let an opportunity go by without sharing. This being the way of life. And so the cultivation of Dharma offers us the possibility of purifying and transforming ourselves. It transforms the tendency towards greed, tendency towards clinging, certainly tendency towards self-centeredness, as well as the fear that's linked to these energies of attachment. So the relief that we feel when we sit, even if I don't care how long you sit, if you sit for 5 minutes, you sit for 2 minutes, if you sit for 30 seconds with a mind that is truly at ease, what you notice when you come out of it is that some thought brings you back to yourself and you are again posited in the center of your universe. And there is an attachment to a self. So Diane or Pannavati seems to disappear when I get to a certain place. There is a selflessness that emerges. There is a divorce or separation from the notion of myself as the center of my universe. And that's what feels so good. Makes one feel weightless. It takes away the pain and the sorrow and the suffering that comes from the continual weight of the rounds of samsara. It brings a kind of joy. The Buddha said one time, he said, why should I be afraid of the pleasure that is not born of this world? So he says, I decided I would not be afraid, and I was not afraid. But in order to get to that place, there had to be the surrendering of the self, of all the things that make one feel that they must examine everything else as outside of oneself. And so this is where it segs with Upeka, where it says it comes together with a thought of equanimity, for instance. And so you can't really be equanimous without having a heart all bound up with generosity. And the greater the generosity, the more equanimity one can experience. That's because one knows that one has done all that could be done. There's not one thing left that I would hold and keep for myself if there was another that needed it. Giving up all the baggage of everything that I own and everything that owns me, from my opinions, to my thoughts, to my possessions, even to the respect that I offer you. That's why one can enter into the practice of enduring insults, overlooking a fault, and tolerating a slight. That's an act of generosity. And it's an act of generosity that has you could almost call it a generosity of spirit, a generosity of attitude. It's maybe a more Buddhist kind of term would be like a fundamental gratitude, because words like spirit and so forth scare us. So if it does, just drop that one from your vocabulary and just think about a fundamental gratitude. And that is an awareness, but not just an awareness, it's a response, a direct response, a response that comes from remembering the preciousness of life, not just human life, of all life, and our virtual interconnectedness. Everything I have is because of other living beings. Sometimes we think, well, this is the merit that comes, it's the fruit, it's the good fortune, of doing good, and in a sense, it's true. But the thing about doing good is realizing that everything we do for ourselves, because when one is initiating something, the fruit of that is all wrapped up in it as well. So when I do good, yes, there is good that comes back because good begets good. The fruit is already wrapped up in the action. So it's no point in me thinking, oh, I did this for you, and I did this for him, and I did that for the other, because all of the fruit of that inures back to myself. So what have I really done except take care of myself? So if we know this, we won't think in those kinds of ways. And giving then becomes just a spontaneous action out of a sense of gratitude for life, out of a sense of recognition that everything I have is because of others. I could not have attained not a single thing that I have had it not been for others. And this gets us into a place that we can begin to think of self and others as equal. Right now, most of us think of self like we're pretty high on the totem pole, pretty high on the spectrum. So if there's needs like mine come first, and then the ones that I love come next, and then maybe just in a general sense in my community they come third, and then maybe people I'm ambivalent about maybe come fourth. The ones I don't like, maybe they come fifth, if at all, and the ones that I have hatred towards, they can forget about it. But there comes a place when one starts to cultivate this kind of generosity that they start to feel, viscerally feel that self and others are equal. And so that when there's a conflict between oneself and another, that one begins to lean towards meeting the needs of the other. And there comes another little stage of that where there is an exchange between self and others. And this is a growing sense of communion with others. It's a growing sense of responsibility for others that's not in a heavy way, like I must take care of them, but in a loving and kind way. If not me, who else? If something comes across my screen and I have the capacity to help, why would I withhold it? Because I don't like somebody? I mean, it's easy to love people that love you. It's not so easy to love people that don't love you. So if you make liking them or them liking you, especially, a criteria for your generosity, then you've done nothing. And so there's this growing stage where you'll start with self and others are equal, and the bodhicitta aspiration will be there. But then it begins to increase and one begins to exchange self and others. And then it grows beyond that until one will begin to benefit others before self, without any sense of sacrifice, without any sense of I am doing. And then everything can get done, and yet there is no doer. It's a burden to be a doer. I guess I need to plug in. It's a burden to be a doer. It's a burden to be a giver in the conventional sense. When one is doing without even any thought, I am doing, or giving without any thought, I am giving, then there's a kind of equanimity that I'm all right with the world. And I understand the ebb and flow due to causes and conditions of the world. So if this moment is appearing, how could it be any other way than how it is? Because at the time of the planting, inherent in that seed is the harvest of what we've planted. So we should think then often. Now, we love meditation. But he had that way down on the list of things to do because it depends on the depth of one's understanding determines the true worth and benefit of the practice of the meditation. One can sit still, and one can go into la la land, or one can steady one's mind and being in the present moment, watching things come up, arise and fade away. That's why thoughts are not you, because they come to you. They come to you, they hang around for a while, and they go away. Matter of fact, it's really difficult to make a thought stay. Even when it's a thought of where, someone has offended you in some kind of way, and you're sitting there trying to push it away, and you can't push it away. It just keeps coming back. But then after a while, it starts to waft off, and you say, wait a minute, I'm not through being mad with you yet. And you have to literally bring it back in order for it to stay. But the generosity that we offer, that we bring to the current moment, is to quickly allow things to vanish. And we develop this habit then of not grasping. And we do it bodily, not just in our mind. So that giving then starts to become a way of life. It becomes a fundamental respect that we offer. We offer to every person, and and people will be impacted, by our respect of them. Often, something just as brief as a nod that says, I see you. Or sometimes when a person has said something, I remember I was speaking at a teacher training for another organization, a very large organization in the United States. And they had just run another teacher out, or two teachers, I think, because, everybody was going through their rights phase, like we have rights. And then I came in and I started talking. And I made a mistake in my language. I'm old, and we learn things certain ways. And even though there may not be an ounce of malice, sometimes the wording can offend. And if the word offends, one should find another way of speaking to try not to offend. That's if you want to be understood, and if you care about making an impact for good by your presence. And so I said, I used the term illegal aliens. And nobody had said anything. And they had just run two teachers out. One teacher, they refused to even, that teacher couldn't come back to the Dharma hall and give them, they just refused any more instruction for them, told them might as well get on a plane and go back to Europe. And they were equally as upset with the other teacher, but nobody said anything. I'm just talking from my heart and talking from my experience. And so the words were riding on a certain energy. And at lunchtime, I went by the teacher's board and there was a little note. It said, Venerable, you might want to consider saying, what is the term? Undocumented workers, not illegal aliens. And so when we came back from lunch, I said, you all are so gracious to me. I thank you so much, that you all uh, they just gave me grace, and they were in their warrior stance at that time. And so I can say that when you have that certain attitude and that certain heart in you, it makes room for you. It makes room even for your mistakes. It helps you to be known and understood, even when you don't always use the right language. And so one can then become a friend to the world, having no malice and no hatred and no disrespect towards anyone, anywhere. And when that's truly your state of heart and your state of mind, then one can abide in equanimity. And so sometimes we can go, I have 2 minutes left. Is that it?
No, Venerable, you have about 17 minutes
17
left.
minutes? Okay, great.
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
so once this kind of generous spirit reigns in us, we have a certain strength, a certain tenacity, because we're not bogged down with the sorrows and the suffering of the world. We understand causality, and we meet it by doing whatever we can do. If something comes by me and I see it, and I have the means to take care of it, or to be a peacemaker in that situation, or to offer what is needed, then I do, without um, a concern or thought, but like I might need this for a rainy day, or without a thought or concern, like they should get a job, without thought or concern about I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps, so should them, without any thought of anything other than here's a need and I can fill it. And like I said, sometimes it's just as simple as acknowledging a person. I can tell you as a Black person, I've gone around for many, many years in many, many circumstances around many, many people, and I was invisible. As a matter of fact, at this very at this same organization, I was attending a conference, and there were 300 of us, and he said, how's everybody doing? We're on day number 3 or day number 4 of the retreat. Something like that. Excuse me, I just have to say, I'm in the room with 300 people, and I feel totally invisible. And that opened up a whole dialogue, and something was accomplished in that retreat after day number 3, when we really started to get real, and we really started to try to find, that part of us in us that is not different from any other person. When we started trying to meet each other, the thing about it is when something like that happens, there comes a unification of mind, and the two become one. And when there's that kind of a merging, that kind of a unity, then movement slows down and it stops. And it's in that stopping, in that stepping out of space and time, the one gets a glimpse of their essential nature. And so sometimes when we sit in meditation, and we've done our preliminary work so that we can sit there having abandoned covetousness and grief for the world, that our attachment to the known self, to the Pannavati, begins to fall away. And there arises this stainless clarity of thusness. These words, it gets very difficult to talk about such things, and actually no need to talk about them. If you just do certain things, follow certain steps, cultivate a certain kind of mind, then you find yourself posited at that right intersection, at 13th and T, not 4th and D, where Prajna reveals with clarity the true nature of reality. And so others throughout our daily interactions will be impacted by us if we have this kind of mind, this generous spirit that enables us to offer, a quick prayer for healing for someone when we feel that someone's in some kind of suffering, or and those that we love, and also our enemies, thinking of them being as oneself. Now, I make mistakes all the time. So how do I relate to others when they make a mistake? Am I calling them out? I don't want to be called out. Of course, I do want to know, but there's a way that you could do that and still leave me with my dignity and to offer some respect. Why wouldn't you not want that for someone else? Just thinking right now, about the 4 immeasurables, thinking about the ascendance into the Brahma Viharas. It's a preliminary practice. When Rahula was asking the Buddha how to just even practice mindfulness so that it was of good benefit, he told him, he took them back to a whole bunch of things you needed to do before you sat down on the pillow. Otherwise, we sit down and we're stepping out. We're not entering into reality, but we're creating an alternate reality. And we get up and we just go back to our normal world, our normal ways of being, our normal ways of seeing things and understanding things. But when we really do these preliminaries, and the Buddha said, first thing I do is I instruct a student in generosity. And then when I see that he has that understanding, that I teach him. You know, the sixth patriarch was very much well-versed. Didn't mean that we don't have to learn anything, because we do. But we have to have the right amounts of study and reflection and purification of conduct. And when we have those in the right proportions, then something happens. More than self-development method, more than mesmerizing ourselves with our pithy sayings and our jargon, more than that. But there is actually an encounter, you could say, with one's essential being. So this practice of Buddhism, this practice, you know, what the Dharma points us to, is really coming to know oneself. And then as the great Zen master said, you know, to know oneself is to forget oneself. And to forget oneself is to know the 10,000 things. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you tonight. This cultivating this generosity of spirit, this fundamental gratitude, this attitude of respect and appreciation, this recognition that everything we have has come from the efforts of others. And that allows us then, when we sit, because we owe people nothing more than that, we find ourselves being fit and useful for every good work. And then it doesn't matter whether we're on the pillow or off the pillow. We're cultivating the behavior of the awakened ones without contradiction, both on the pillow and off the pillow, allowing the full-bodied compassion to arise and the joy in the successes of others, the uprooting and the abandonment of cruelty, and just simply loving, being kind. And in these three ways come to their fulfillment, like filling a cup of water. It said loving kindness uproots hatred in us, and compassion uproots cruelty. You know what cruelty is like? When somebody, you want to see them get their comeuppance, just a little cruel streak in, like you just want to see them get punished or something like that. Any of that, checking ourselves, see, is any of that in us? And pointing it out to ourselves. And like, I don't want you to have to point these things out to me. That's why I'm going to examine myself. I love it. And the Bible says, let a man examine himself. I want to look and examine myself and see if any of that is there. And if it is, not just uprooting it in my mind, but taking the actions to change my behavior until goodness is spontaneously flowing out of me like a fountain. Yeah, this practice of generosity, of Dharma. It's the foundation of our spiritual development. It is our ground of compassion. And it is also the prerequisite to the realization of liberation.